back to the podcast. Hope you're all having a good day today. I've been chilling. Sure, Josh's been chilling, but how have you been?
I've been good. Not as good as you. I heard you went to a fancy concert, got back at
hmm
5 a.m. Today.
Yeah.
So props to Corsian. He's a warrior man. Um, I guess that explains why the Broncos are having a little bit more success than the Bears, I guess. But it's all relative. We're both struggling. Um, kind of a tough situation with my teams and supporting them, but um, I'd say I'm doing pretty good otherwise.
Okay. Yeah. Obviously, another week of football. My fantasy team keeps on dropping. Well, one of them does good. In Josh's league, I'm doing pretty good, but in my league, I'm doing pretty bad. So, um, yeah, that's that. But anyways, um, going into, I guess we're gonna talk about obviously the games this week. Starting off with Thursday night football's game, which was the Broncos and Chiefs game. You know, I recall if I remember correctly, last week you said, you'll be able to see the Broncos winning if they can hold opposing offenses to less than 20 points, and well, they did that here, but it looks like they're still losing, Josh. So, what happened this time?
Um, yeah, that's a tough pill to swallow because like last year, like if the Broncos just like scored more than 20 points,
hmm
they would have won like most of their games.
hmm
And like in this season so far, it's the exact polar opposite until this week. Like their defense actually played really well. It was kind of funny that their best performance came against the Chiefs. Like if
hmm
I look at the Chiefs statistics against the Broncos, they had 19 points in total, right? Um,
hmm
and if I look at their their scoring percentage, 45% of their drives came with a score, but like a lot of it was just field goals. Like in my
hmm
opinion, like they had a couple passing touchdowns, but like the real key stat to look at is 9% of their drives ended up with a touchdown.
hmm
And if you look at the rest of their stats, like it's all like double digits, obviously, but like the lowest other percentage of them of how many times they scored a touchdown out of their total drives is 18%. Like against the Lions and the Jets, the previous low was 18%. Jaguars was 20%. Bears 45%. Don't want to get into that. Vikings
hmm
38%. But like against the Broncos, it was 9%. And we've been talking about the Broncos having like one of the worst defenses in the league this entire season. Like
hmm
literally, like you could that's the one defense to avoid in fantasy, obviously, but like all your skill position players, chalk them up to have a good week because the scheme is not marrying with the players'
hmm
talents at all. And to see them perform really well, like against the Chiefs, was like a really huge surprise.
hmm
And one player I think that really helped a ton is like Justin Simmons. For whatever reason, he's like the kryptonite of Patrick Mahomes because I think he has like
hmm
4 interceptions. Like
Yeah.
in all of his face-offs against Patrick
hmm
Mahomes, which is just like crazy. I don't think any other player has more. So those are just some little nuggets I have noticed.
hmm Yeah. Broncos offense really sucked that game. I think it comes down to one. Players just not getting open. Like was like I don't know. Steve Smith's calling Jerry Judy a jag, and the way
I
he
saw that.
plays. I mean, like the way he plays, like he can be an elite route runner, but for whatever reason, despite him being an elite route runner, seems like Russell Wilson can't get the ball to him, and it's like Russell Wilson's had good games, but also like you can blame receivers to a certain extent, but like also only being able to put up 95 pass yards. I feel like a certain bit of that has to go on the quarterback, where obviously it's a pretty inexcusable stat for a guy that's getting paid as much as he is. Um, and especially with the fact that he's had multiple games this season already throwing over 300 pass yards, and so you're thinking how does this happen with a guy, especially if your defense finally shows up one week and your offense decides to do absolutely nothing. But yeah, I think I mean, if the Broncos aren't really able to get much out of the receivers, like I've said in the past weeks, I wouldn't be surprised if a couple trades end up happening close to the deadline or closer to the deadline. with guys like maybe Jerry Jeudy, maybe Cortland Sutton, uh, being on their way out. But um, yeah, I don't see this Broncos team being competitive at bare minimum. Probably 2025 is probably when I first will imagine them being like a competitive team. If that is if they do draft like a quarterback this upcoming draft, and then next year, it's like a deal with the Russell Wilson dead cap situation, and then the year after, you're finally on like have a little bit more cap space to work with, and you'll have basically all your draft capital still to develop or to work around your rookie quarterback. But I mean, that's in my opinion probably best case scenario with this team. But yep, just my thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, just to piggyback a little bit on how the Broncos offense beforehand, like they they used a lot more 21 personnel, which is basically two tight ends on the field and
Hmm.
one back per se, as opposed to not as much 11 personnel where they have one tight end and one back in their
Hmm.
formations. So I think a little bit of Russell Wilson's yards per se being so low was just how they chose to utilize that personnel because
Hmm.
usually when you go in 21 personnel, two tight ends, one running back, that's the most optimal
Hmm.
situation to run because you got seven blockers
Hmm.
like going
Yeah.
against the front seven, which is ideal. You want that because then a running back can pick a lane.
Hmm.
Um, but I think the bigger question here is I think Russell Wilson lost his athletic ability and he
Hmm.
relied too much on it when you look at his like growing up in the Seattle offense, evolving from a rookie who just convert first down after first down after first down. You find yourself like thinking of how like Russell Wilson was able to just to like outrun people easily and
Hmm.
get that first down when needed. And now like he seemingly can. He's always like falling forward or sliding well short of the marker. And I just
Hmm.
think like that speed element is gone and he hasn't made up for it yet with like the pass processing that we think
Hmm.
he has. He's had an incredible deep ball. Like that's the one thing I would lean on if I was him. But like you didn't see them take that many shots.
Hmm.
And the Chiefs defense, like granted, they're really, really good. They're probably one of the better units in the league, which you probably wouldn't have said about like 2 or 3 years ago about the Chiefs, which goes to show like how much turnover and like development they've had on that area. Props to them. But you have all these weapons already there before you invested in Russell Wilson. You drafted guys. Like I'm still wondering why they haven't used like Marvin Mims yet. Like this is kind of the point in the season when you just like throw the kitchen sink as far as receivers. You already done it with Jaleel McLaughlin. Like
Hmm.
why not like get those vertical threats that like Russell Wilson is accustomed to throwing the ball to those types of receivers and see what happens. Like
Hmm.
it already worked against the Bears. Like I had to watch it. I was I was devastated when I saw it
Hmm.
because it clinched the win for them. Like that deep pass to Marvin Mims. Why not try that more often in the game and see what happens? Because
Hmm.
honestly, I think Judy's checked out. I think Sutton's checked out. And I think a lot of these veterans who have been on the team like 2 or 3 years, like through this whole saga, are just like done. Like
Hmm.
they're just done. And like now's the time we have to see like who wants it, like despite of the record, and then who doesn't.
Hmm. Yeah. Oh, an interesting stat I saw about Cortland Sutton though. Like at least up until this point in the season, his amount of touchdowns he had is like the most the Broncos have had from a single like receiver or whatever, like since like sometime like Demarius Thomas or something like that. With just like Cortland Sutton's red zone efficiency right now, and I'm like that's just how long the Broncos offense has just like, or at least receiver room has been like abysmal basically, just with not being able to get like one receiver really got going and or being like a consistent target in the red zone, which I thought was just a unique thing to see.
He's getting 42% of targets in the end zone, which is like really nice. Like so,
Hmm.
he's a majority of the time they're targeting him. They want him
Hmm.
there, and I would love to see like the third and fourth down targets increase. Like it's like 20% right now. He's probably the one guy you want that number to be at like 30% or more often.
Hmm.
You just throw it to him more often. Um, but the stats are there for him to have a bigger bigger season. It's just like I
Mhm.
think what I've seen from him is like he still has those cases where he like claps on the ball and drops it way too often.
Mhm.
Still, like despite being in the league for so long. So uh like he's one of those cases where he has so much of potential. He needs to live up to it and clean it up and make those mistakes
Mhm.
less often. But
Yeah.
he may be another bright spot on that team, like when he's hot.
Mhm. Yeah, but that's kind of most of what I have for the Broncos and the Chiefs game. No, you know, another fun little game was the Ravens and Titans game. I wasn't able to catch much of it, but I think you had a couple things you wanted to say about that, so you want to get started with that?
Um, yeah, I don't really know where to go with the Ravens because they seemingly always like look really strong in the beginning, and something happens where they just let the teams back into it.
Mhm.
And like against the Steelers, it bit them because Steelers defense is like elite. Where if you make multiple mistakes, they're gonna make you pay for that.
Mhm.
And the Titans did come back in this game. At one point, the score was I think 18-13, and like that was just wild because like you just had like announcers saying that, oh, Titans came in that Friday morning. They're not prepared to like play in London. Whereas the Ravens came in like in the beginning of the week, they're already situated, settled, they were prepared. And you saw the dichotomy play out in that first half, but then like all of a sudden, like Derrick Henry breaks a run. Like
Mhm.
the Ravens just have like bad luck drops, like just lack of focus, like in the second half, and they let the Titans back into it. But like credit that team for closing it out in this game. Um,
Mhm.
I'd say the two targets that are probably going to be reliable for the Ravens, one probably familiar because he's had the longest chemistry with Lamar Jackson, and two the rookie. It's Mark Andrews and Zay Flowers. Those are two guys that I would keep like putting out in lineups and trusting them if you're doing bets because they're gonna produce. They're gonna separate.
Mhm.
And you see the team scheming up plays or like featuring Zay Flowers in different spots. Like I think in this game he was like playing outside a lot more often than he's used to. But um like he's the slot machine, like still but
Mhm.
in college. Like he wins off of quickness and I you saw the team utilize that. Um
Mhm.
I don't really know what to make of their backfield yet. I think it's pretty
Yeah.
much still like a lot. It's like one of those cases like the Eagles where like having the quarterback be such a run threat like allows the running backs to have easier gaps and lanes to run through.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I know it's a lot of Ravens focused talk I just mentioned, but like it really shouldn't have been as close as it was. Like credit to Tennessee
Mhm.
for coming back, but it was more like the Ravens were just like undisciplined and
Mhm.
they ended up like overcoming that in this game.
Mhm. Yeah. And I feel like the Ravens are like just a team. I feel like that could be in like the runnings to either draft a quarterback or sign like a veteran free agent coming off next off season. I mean, we really don't know how J.K. Dobbins will come back from his injury because I know it was basically he keeps on getting like it's almost the same injury every time, which is unfortunate to him. But in like the reality of the situation is, I feel like the Ravens really can't just trust him to maintain a workload, and then there's always been like a bunch of hype around the backups of the Ravens, like Gus Edwards. Feel like he's always been like a hot commodity once J.K. Dobbins gets hurt each year. But I mean, he has his good games, but he also has quite a lot or quite a handful of pretty poor games each year, which from a team that does a run first type offense, something you can't really just allow and kind of really holds you back. Funny enough, I know there's talks about the Titans potentially shipping away Derrick Henry just with the Tannehill injury and whatnot, but I think that'd be kind of a funny combo or funny trade to happen. Just thinking about how they just played each other, but I don't know. It's kind of interesting things to consider here, at least with the running backs. But yeah, like you said, running back room is pretty muddy right now for the Ravens right now.
Yeah, I definitely think it's one of those cases where you need to grab a guy like Devin Singletary. He's looked amazing in the
Hmm.
Texans. He had a great week last week. Like I think a guy like that will help that team. Honestly, I would take a flyer on Trey Sermon. I think he'd be a fantastic fit in that scheme. Like I'm like he's buried in the cold step chart right now, but it's obvious he has talent. He'd be exactly the kind of guy you're hoping for, or like maybe like a Dalvin Cook. Like if he decides like he doesn't want to be at the Jets any longer now that Brees looks fantastic. Like those are like a couple guys, maybe Kareem
Mhm.
Hunt. Like if he parts from the Browns again, like just a couple guys there.
Mhm.
Um, did you get a chance to see your boy Malik Willis?
No, I did not see Malik Willis. No.
He took also. I'll preface this by saying he took 4 sacks in 1 quarter, which
Uh-huh.
is not what you want to see
Mhm.
out of your future first round, your future first round star. But he looked a lot better, like as far as processing the field and
Mhm.
like passing. I was really
Yeah.
impressed by that. So
Mhm.
he's not there yet by any means, but he's looked better than his
Mhm.
rookie year. So
Yeah.
just one little nugget out there that I
Mhm.
noticed.
Okay.
I think the only other thing that comes to mind is like the lack of targets for DeAndre Hopkins. Like he
Mhm.
drew a couple pass interference plays, but like one catch, like 20 yards, that's not something you expect to see out of him.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like he was like not the focal point or like the first read or like the primary receiver
Mhm.
a lot of times. And I think it was one of those cases where they missed like Traylon Burks because of that to take some
Mhm.
relief off of DeAndre Hopkins. Like he don't get me wrong, DeAndre Hopkins is still a baller. He can still win on technique and his huge wingspan, but he's not like the explosive player like that's gonna break a 50-yard like reception catch and
Mhm.
run like that. So like you want to make sure you like prioritize targeting him in the right spots, and I don't think he was in this game.
Yeah. Wait a second.
Yep, no worries. While Corsown's getting ready for that, um, just some other like fantasy nuggets. Both teams like scored under 10% like touchdowns off their total drives. So out of all their drives, 10% or lower. Very defensive focused battle. Um, you saw a lot of like passing and red zone touchdowns mixed in for the Ravens, where it's just like all like um, red zone touchdowns for like rushing touchdowns for the Titans in that perspective. So that was a cool nugget to see there. Um, but yeah, um, anything you noticed from the highlights that you wanted to add, Corsan, or we can go into the give me five now if you want.
I don't know. That was all good. Yeah, we can go into the give me five section. Um. Yeah. Well, 'cause I'm in charge today. I'll start. But my first guy for you, I have Cooper Cup.
Star, absolute star.
Mhm.
Yeah, I can expand a little bit off that. um, just pulling up some stats for him real quick. But I think the one thing to know about him was like a lot of people were worried um, how he'd fare like coming back from the injury. But I think that was all like settled in his first game back, honestly, in the first quarter. Like the amount of catches he had on that first drive is like something to pay attention to. And I'm gonna pull up his stats from week 5 to week 6, but like his targets per route run is 32% at like 42% of the targets, with 70% of them being catchable. That's like great to see. Obviously, you want those catchable targets to be higher, but the air yards percentage, the average depth of target is like really good. Um, he's getting target in the end zone like 1/3 of the time, more than 40% on third and fourth down. So like he is clearly the number one wide receiver on that
Mhm.
team. I don't think Puka's going away. I think Puka's still like a guy that can contribute in the Robert Woods role, but Cooper Cup's back. Wouldn't worry about him.
Mhm.
My guy for you is Michael Mayer.
Yeah, Michael Mayer. Um. Yes, my word for him would be like exciting, I guess. Um. Maybe not in like the traditional sense of like a superstar player, but um, going into the draft, he was considered a top tight end prospect. A lot of people thought he was gonna, be the, like one A, one B type guy with Dalton Kincaid. But he had a slower-ish start to the season, where he wasn't getting touches, but over the past like 2, 3-ish weeks, we did see a snap count start to rise pretty quickly. Where week 3 he was 47% snap, then week 4 going to 51, then 66, and then this last week he had a 81% snap share, which obviously is good for him. I think. I mean, like tight end is one of the harder positions to learn on or just in the NFL in general. And so I think the fact that they did have guys, I guess, in place to play ahead of him for the first little bit, I think may have been beneficial for just, helping him getting more time to get up to speed without having to, stress about week to week game situations. And so I think that as long as he doesn't do any stupid errors, his production will continue to, you know, kind of showcase itself and be really good. Um, then my guy for you is Zach Moss.
Zach Moss. While I think Jonathan Taylor is going to take over that backfield as the season progresses, given his natural talent, he's a better player than Zach Moss. Not not that I have him invested in all my leagues, but on like the Zach Moss note, he's still a really good player. I think the Colts want to get him involved as much as possible. Like he might play a Kareem Hunt role in this offense, but be utilized larger than that, which is like a positive sign. I look at his stats, like his fan stats, like week 5 through week 6. He got around like 65% of the snaps on average, 58% of the rushing attempts. He still went out on routes like 52% of the time. While the targets are low, like at 11%, that's still like value as a receiving option, where he's not as known for that as like other clear receiving threats. So that's something positive you want to see. Um, I think the real key stat that I look at with him is the 2 minute snaps, where it's at like 30%. So whether it's like Gardner Minshew at quarterback now that Anthony Richardson is out for the year, or like the low down and distance snaps percentage, like at 63%. So like if it's 33 or lower, like he's getting a majority of those carries. I think it's a positive sign that they still want to utilize him and they have a plan to utilize him, even when his like percentage gets lower. So I wouldn't really worry about his decrease of usage. I just wouldn't count on him as your running back one, obviously, but I think he can post some RB2 weeks or like flex plays. Like he's still valid for that throughout the season.
Gotcha.
My guy for you is Raheem Mostert.
Sir, I feel like when A-Chain went down, everybody kind of assumed what would happen happened. Um, and so, I mean, when you look like week to week, in all honesty, like even with the emergence of A-Chain, like Mostert's snap count didn't drop at all. And so like it was just a matter of, I think, you know, A-Chain just having really explosive plays, which limited a handful of the touches that Mostert got. And so now we're just seeing those touches basically being re-added to Mostert. And I know like it's Salvin Ahmed or Salvin Ahmed. He's I think back from injury, and so now he's kind of back into the mix. And obviously he's no A-Chain, but um, I think we're just gonna see Mostert be the lead guy here. Obviously his yards per carry is phenomenal, and he's a solid receiver out of the backfield, which has kept his um, snap share pretty high regardless of A-Chain's production. Which again, I think regardless, I think this is really good for him, especially with him just being older. The fact that he's still being able to be productive, his speed doesn't seem to have dropped at all. But then when A-Chain does come back, I think he's still going to be just as efficient.
I think he's the classic case where like people get scared off of him because of the injury risk, and
Mm-hmm.
you undervalue him because of that. Like
Mm-hmm.
I think he was going like an 11th or 12th round in redraft leagues,
Mm-hmm.
and he was like in the starting running back for an offense that schemes to use him in the optimal spots. And I
Mm-hmm.
think a lesson learned from that is don't worry about his injury. Prepare for that by having multiple options.
Mm-hmm.
Get the guys in good offenses. And we knew Miami's a good offense when players are healthy.
Mm-hmm.
There's just kind of a lot of people made those written assumptions that players would get hurt. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, Raheem Mostert is going to get hurt like the
Mm-hmm.
season at some point. You don't know that. Well, is it a
Yeah.
possibility? Yeah, but take the value, take what he does, and use it to benefit your roster while it can, and have a backup plan. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's extremely important. Mostert's one of those cases because if you
Mm-hmm.
have him, you're super happy with him on your lineup.
Yep. Um, Yeah, and then going to my third person, I got Rashid Shaheed.
I know he's a favorite of yours, so I
Mhm,
wasn't surprised when you wanted to talk about him. But he's done really well this season. Like he's kind of like the missing cog to the Saints to get like Olave and Michael Thomas and that offense like up
mhm,
and running. And while like Derek Carr hasn't made the jump I expected to, that prediction is looking really bad with the way
mhm,
Jared Goff's looking and the way Derek Carr is looking in comparison. Like he is coming back from an injury to his AC joint, so maybe it'll give him some time. But more importantly, I think he's kind of like that missing piece the Saints were looking for to expand everything. And
mhm,
the way I can tell he's that deep threat, like even beyond just watching him, his average depth of target is almost 20 yards. It's 18.4, which is ridiculous. Like, and his play action targets is almost 30% at 27. Um, he has a really high ranking, but like you see big play threat, like that's what they're using him for. And he's one of those players where if it's a good rushing matchup for the defense, or even if the defense is really good against the run, he still like is gonna be a threat because most of his like he's the primary guy coming off his play action targets, which is
mhm,
huge. And like as long as Alvin Kamara is like humming, he's gonna do well. So like
mhm,
whenever like Alvin Kamara has a blow up game on the running game, like look for Shaheed to be the primary benefactor of that.
mhm.
Um, my next guy is not necessarily a guy; it's a bunch of dudes. They managed to give the Eagles their first loss of the season, and I couldn't decide on which player to pick because it really wasn't just one player. So I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. What do you think about the Jets defense?
Yeah, Jets defense is really good. This scheme I think is really good because I think this, yeah, I mean even the past couple of weeks they've been missing a lot of their top cornerbacks, and so I mean like even we see here this game that AJ Brown more or less torched the just this Jets defense, but even so like uh the Eagles weren't really able to put up that many points on the board. We see that I mean we see the Jets elite run defense really show up here. Like at the start of the season, I said or at I guess end of last season, I said Quentin Williams arguably had the best like play from the defensive tackle position last season, and I mean, I feel like regardless of what happens, we always will call Aaron Donald the best until he like has a significant fall off. But um, I feel like Quentin Williams is an easy second best defensive tackle in the league right now. Just looking at all things considered, and I think people just quickly forgot about that when Aaron Rodgers gets hurt and you're seeing Zach Wilson playing some football, even though he's playing better than normal right now. But I mean, I think we see this run defense really manifest itself this week. With just the Eagles rush offense being pretty abysmal with DeAndre Swift averaging 1.8 yards per carry, and I mean like the Eagles we talked about having one of the premier offensive lines in the league, just kind of basically not being able to create those scenarios or create those gaps for their running backs to, um, get those big gains. And it's not like a knock on the Eagles; it's just how good the Jets defensive front is.
And I'll go higher. I'd say like as good as the Eagles are on the offensive line, I think the Jets are as good as on the defensive line.
Hmm.
Granted, it didn't help that Lane Johnson got hurt in the middle of the
Hmm.
game, but like even then, like they just got after it.
Hmm.
They just like it's one of those cases where it's like you have to be careful with guys like DeAndre Swift or like Rashad White. Like they'll look good in certain games where like the offensive line is a clear advantage against the defense, but
Hmm.
like on a level playing field, like offensive line and defensive line, like those types of players are not going to transcend what the line play does, and like the Jets like shut them down. And I thought they had a good plan to like contain just Jalen Hurts. Like they wanted him to move off a spot, but still like get a rush home, so like he never felt comfortable. They didn't just send four; sometimes they send five from different spots in targeted ways. And another guy like who I think is a little bit overrated at this point is Devonta Smith. because you could still get physical with him and push him to like the boundary. That's kind of his one weakness. And the Jets pretty much just said, okay, we have no way to press AJ Brown or like let him roam free. We're just gonna let him do whatever and just double him when he gets to the red zone. And the Eagles couldn't counter with like Devonta Smith because like Devonta Smith's supposed to be the guy like when AJ Brown is doubled, like he's the guy you're targeting or Goddard, but mostly Smith. And
Mhm.
he couldn't do jack when it was like he was tasked as the primary receiver. So
Mhm.
um, it's just one of those cases where like the Jets are one of the few teams that have the personnel to match what the Eagles bring on the firepower on the offensive side. And we'll get into this with like later when we talk about the Browns and like other like San
Mhm.
Francisco or like even Dallas from last night. Having multitude of pass rushers is really really important because that's what drives like the star of your defense.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. I mean, it was a good game, but like, yeah, Jets defense is really the real deal here. I think, yeah, again, people, I think it's like the whole Aaron Rodgers effect of like, well, first Aaron Rodgers goes to the Jets, and so everybody's like, oh, the offense is gonna be the focal point here, and then he gets hurt, and then they're winning, and then they're like, oh, well, like I guess Zach Wilson's playing really good, but in reality, I mean, he is playing better than everyone expected, but it does come down to that defense just being really good, and having a lot of just schematically good playmakers that make up for like again injuries in that secondary, which um, I thought was really impressive by them. But yeah, I guess going on to my next person, I have a lot of offense. I think of all offensive guys this time for you, but it is Quentin Johnston for the Chargers.
Yeah, sorry for the hold up. I'm trying to compare like him to Joshua Palmer because I think that's where the context of
Mm,
this question is like really important. Once Mike Williams went down, and I look at his usage on route percentage compared to Palmer, and it tells me he still has a long way to go. Like he's
mm,
being used like on 48% of routes, while Joshua Palmer's using 100% of routes. So when Quentin Johnston's in, they're running 11 personnel, and it's kind of like either Eckler or play action at that point.
mm,
And his targets per route run is low, like 5%. Didn't get that many targets. 3% of targets went to him. None of them are catchable. Um, his average depth of target was 9 yards. Um, all of his targets were on third and fourth down, um, pretty much. Didn't get any of the end zone targets or play action targets. So like the way I'm being used is like they seem like they're trying to use him between the 20s if they can,
mm,
and when they do, very sparingly, at least in this game. So it
mm,
tells me they don't really trust like Josh, not Joshua Palmer, Quentin Johnson. They don't trust Quentin Johnson in like the third and fourth down like areas or end zone as much as
mm,
other players. And that kind of checks out when you look at how well Keenan Allen played. Austin Eckler played amazing. Like, why would
mm,
you? Like you're leaning on those two stars. So like
yeah.
I don't see him having like a wide receiver two effect the way Mike Williams was with like some wide receiver one blow up weeks. If there's a guy
Mhm,
that's gonna have a wide receiver two effect on this team, like in role and in fantasy, it's Joshua Palmer
mhm,
because he's running 100% of the routes. He's getting like 16% of the targets per route run. He has a lot better catchable targets at 60%. Still not great, but it's a lot better.
mhm,
21% of the targets. And his average depth of target is like higher than a first down. So they're using him in like different areas of the field. So,
mhm,
and on top of that, he's being targeted at 40% in zone targets. Um, and his third and fourth down targets are double as much as Quentin Johnson. So there's a pecking order here where I think Quentin Johnson's still like the fourth or fifth option on that team. So I'm not really like high on him this season.
mhm,
That's more of like a 2 or 3
mhm.
seasons from now, like how he develops.
Yeah, I was looking at some like football subreddits in terms of like Dynasty and both the Chargers subreddits, and something that like it seemed like a lot of like I guess the common sentiment for a handful of fans of the Chargers was that they're trying to. It seems like that Quentin Johnston is being put into the Mike Williams role where he isn't. I mean, like maybe size wise, he might fit that, but like technique wise, he doesn't really follow that role. Whereas he probably more likely follows that Keenan Allen position in terms of the receiver room. But like, why would you have him running those Keenan Allen routes when you already have Keenan Allen there? And so I think, like you said, it's a couple year development thing where once Keenan Allen is finally out of the chart, maybe whether it be retirement or he's just not good enough, so he gets released from the team. I think that's around the time we might see Quentin Johnston maybe thrive in the offense there. But until then, yeah, I think they're just trying to sort out what other role he could fit while Keenan Allen's doing his thing there. Because I mean, I feel like every year people write off Keenan Allen, but he keeps on putting up crazy good numbers, and so can't knock him for that.
All right. Yeah, I think one other note on him, like meaning Quentin Johnson, is he still had flaws. Like I think I was less high on him in the draft because of his catching ability. And like when I hear that he's being used in the Mike Williams role, it kind of makes sense why he's not getting the targets because like he's not used to winning that way. Never mind like the lack of experience he has in that position. So like he is a lot more like underneath route, like target him there. He can make run after catch opportunities. That's his strength. So like if you're using him on the boundary and you're asking him to run like 9 yard routes per se, like and like get the first down, like when you're already at the first down marker, it's like kind of like more pressure on him to catch the ball versus like asking him to run four people and make guys miss, which is counterintuitive because he thinks that would be harder for somebody to make like five guys miss to get the first down versus just catching it at the first down marker. But like
Hmm.
it's just where his skill set is. So he's one of those tough players where you just got to be patient with him. Um,
Hmm.
Another guy that we thought we had to be patient with, but has shown some signs is Drake London. What do you think about his recent performances?
Um, well, I mean, like I mean, you could I feel like look back at his rookie season as well and like see how good of a player he could potentially be. I think had he been drafted to either, like the Jets last season or if he was drafted to the Saints last season, I think he'd be in really similar talks to, Chris Olave, similar talks to Garrett Wilson, but he just kind of had like, the tough quarterback issues here. Um, and I mean, like when you are here, let me find him real quick.
No worries, take your time on that.
Yeah, but I mean, like when you're looking at his play, like he's dominated the snap share. Where he's playing almost every down in all like the games that he's in, and when you look at just kind of like even more advanced stats down that, you see that he's getting open. He's an efficient route runner, which I think I don't know, a lot of people questioned. I think just because he- going into the draft again with during his rookie season, um, everybody was talking about Olave and everybody was talking about Wilson, and so as like a premier, I guess, route runners within that class, at least in the first round. And so then people kind of wrote him off, but he still had a solid rookie season. And I think just because he had a slow start of this season, people kind of thought that maybe, oh, he actually isn't that good when it was more so for quarterback play because now we're seeing Desmond Ritter put up at least decent to above average stats right now, which now we're seeing like actually getting the ball to your guys gets them the yardage that people expect them to see. And now we're like, oh wait, maybe Drake London isn't as bad as we thought he was, but he was good. He was good the whole time.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for a quarterback upgrade. I keep hearing Fields to the Falcons, and I don't want that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But if it does happen, look out because Kyle Pitts and London are about to eat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like they've both been doing pretty good the last couple of weeks, but yeah, a quarterback upgrade certainly would ensure the weekly production that we're seeing right now. But my last guy for you is Ramondre Stevenson.
Yeah, I went a little bit more of like kind of comparing Stevenson and Elliott when I thought about this because I
Mm-hmm.
think the large like amount of fandoms who have like shares of Ramondre Stevenson are kind of disappointed. I certainly had a lot of Ramondre Stevenson on my rosters. Was super excited about him going into the season. I thought he was like an underrated running back because if it's a new scheme, you would hope for upgraded offense in the Patriots, and it looked that way for the first couple weeks. But I think everybody's just confused on the usage compared to Ezekiel Elliott. So I thought I'd throw some stats comparing them both. Like Ramondre Stevenson has 65% of the snaps, whereas Elliott has 38% rather. Um, he's getting more of the rushing attempts, where it's like 56 to 34, but that's still not good. Sorry, I'm just getting my charger here. Um, but I look at like his inside the five attempts where he's like more likely to score touchdowns, and that stat is still good, which makes me want to keep him because he still has that touchdown upside. It's just a matter of like how often is New England going to get inside the five or inside the red zone.
Mhm,
That makes me a little bit skeptical of that offense.
mhm,
But his inside five attempts is he has 25% of that, whereas like Ezekiel Elliott has 8% of the inside the five rushing attempts, and he's still getting like a high majority of the low down and distance snaps. So like they're still using him as a tough runner in between the tackles. That's what you want to see, and he's still getting targeted, although at 11%, like on his routes. So like I look at all this and saying, okay, it's not great, but he's still the primary back in this
mhm,
offense. It's just a matter of like, okay, when is
mhm,
Mac gonna figure it out? And that's kind of limiting his production right there. So I look at that comparing both Stevenson and Elliott. Like obviously Elliott's a great handcuff to have, but like it's really dependent on like can Bill O'Brien and Mac Jones figure something out in the
mhm,
next 3 weeks.
mhm. Yeah. It's kind of quick thing to add on. I think, um, yeah, I think that I don't know. There's a lot of question marks about, I guess, Ezekiel Elliott going to this Patriots offense because obviously with the Cowboys, we had kind of started to see the big slowdown with him. But everyone was always wondering, like, maybe he cuts during the off season and he kind of looks fresh or whatnot. But Ezekiel Elliott, I think when he first went to the Patriots, I remember all like the Ramondre Stevenson fantasy owners were like super bummed out about it. They're like, oh no, my Ramondre stocks. But uh, yeah, Ezekiel Elliott's just continued to regress each year pretty drastically, and I think we've seen it here pretty big. Obviously, it's a new scheme and everything, but um, I think even the first couple weeks, like the times he did have the ball, he didn't look that great, and so I think even though Stevenson wasn't looking as great as everybody wanted to, um, Ezekiel Elliott just looked worse in like every aspect almost, and so it always gave me confidence, thinking like if the Patriots offense were ever to get going, it will be Ramondre that will eat, and Ezekiel probably have similar production at least in terms of fantasy points, to what he's been doing so far.
Yeah, it's just one of those cases where it's like you have to wait and see.
Hmm.
And that's kind of like the bummer about it. Like you don't know what's gonna happen until it happens. So like until then, it's just kind of like, well, like I I hope they find a primary receiver. And like we've been talking about, like that's what they're missing, like to drive this offense when like things go south and like they don't have the scheme for it. Who's gonna be? I thought it was Hunter Henry. He's been phased out of the offense, so it's not just a Ramondre problem. It's the Patriots offense problem.
Hmm. Yeah. Patriots offense just looks pretty stagnant with Mac Jones right now, and I know
They're not
like,
very good, and Mac is not helping by making bad decisions too.
hmm because I thought this was going to be a big breakout year for Mac Jones, but obviously it's not looking that way right now. And they had Bailey Zapp playing a little bit, and then they brought up Malik Cunningham from the practice squad, as well. I mean, I don't think that's a sign that he's going to be taking away, the quarterback snaps. But I think it is a sign that the Patriots are worried about quarterback production within their games, and they just want to make sure they have guys that they can move in and out just with the quarterback struggles, which makes perfect sense to me there.
They might use him in a Taysom Hill type role. Like
Yeah,
that's
I
what
wouldn't be
kind of
surprised for
screamed
that.
out to
Yeah.
me because like last year, like when he was used, like it was kind of in that sense. But he's just like a gadget guy.
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay, want to talk about the rest of week 6?
Did you have one more guy or?
Um, I think I talked about all my. Oh yeah, you're right. I completely forgot about him. I want to get your take on the Arizona Cardinals backfield, or maybe if you watch Keontae Ingram, what do you think about him?
Um, I think, I mean, the remaining guys they have, I think are just pretty average guys right now. Like I feel like at best you might have a James Robinson type, not build obviously, but like just like maybe similar type production where you get a guy that is a steady runner, but like nothing really is special about him. And so while the guy might be serviceable for a year, like I think Ingram, he averaged 4 yards a carry this last week, and he was named what like the start of this last week as well. But it's like I wouldn't be surprised if they're just feeding the hot hand more often than not. But then, yeah, I just think all these guys aren't that great in particular, and that if they really did want, you know, at post James Conner, if they wanted somebody, they probably not choose one of these guys. Like as a backup, they're fine, but like again, I think these guys aren't anything to rave about. They'll score you points for fantasy if you need it this year, but uh, yeah, again, there's nothing really special about them. I mean, James Conner really was their all like was that running back room in terms of like production. And after that, I mean they had their explosive plays here and there, but like consistency wise, I didn't really like really anybody else there. But that's just my own thoughts from what I saw from the stats and just a little bit of that, yeah.
I think I have a different take on this.
Hmm.
I think Jim Mercado, you'd be right about him. I think he's kind of like just a guy in that offense. They
Hmm.
just took him undrafted and just say, okay, let's just see what they got, and they like using him in the scheme.
Hmm.
But I think it's again one of those cases similar to like Zach Evans or Cam Akers. Like I
Hmm.
think Keontae Ingram's one of those guys they haven't realized yet, and he
Hmm.
hasn't got the opportunities as much
Hmm.
to show what he can really do based on like yeah, he's been named the starter, but like the
Hmm.
ways they've been using him, I don't think have been optimal. So
Hmm.
I'm holding out hope that he turns out to be kind of like the backup running back you wish you had. But it's kind of a wait and see, like how are the Cardinals going to use him?
Yeah. I mean, like I still feel like Keontae Ingram could be a good backup, but like I don't think he's ever going to be in like elite starter. I guess. I mean, there's a
Oh no,
reason.
I'm just talking
Yeah.
about like maybe like top 20 running back production. I think he can give you that week to week if
Yeah.
used correctly.
Yeah. I mean, if he's starting each week, I wouldn't be surprised with that. I'm just saying, like long term, I think he would be like he's definitely a career backup type running back, which isn't awful, but like, um, yeah, if like again, if they move on from James Conner, like they're definitely going to bring in a guy, hopefully be the lead guy with Keontae kind of just backing up again, or Mercado backing up. But
Okay.
um, yeah, I mean, Keontae Ingram struggled to get like touches earlier in the season. Um, I know like other factors lead to that and whatnot, but um, I think it just speaks to the strength of the room right now. But
That's fair.
um, yeah, I mean that's all what we got for our Give Me Five segment. But obviously, we have a couple more games that we want to go over still. First and foremost, the Vikings and the Chicago Bears. And how'd you
Can we
feel about
move
that?
on to the next topic, please?
Sure. Okay. Next up, I'm just kidding.
Dang it. Okay. All right. It was worth a shot. But um yeah, going into this game, I was really excited. Bears offense looked like they finally woke up based on like how they performed against the Broncos and the Commanders. And the Vikings are without Justin Jefferson, like on IR. So okay, I thought this was a winnable game. And their offense was a little bit slow. I don't want to put it all on Fields. Like obviously the injury sucks, but
Hmm.
I think the way he got hurt is kind of worth talking about because it's a common problem where we had in a different issue where he would take too many sacks by like holding on to the ball and trying to like be a playmaker, like
Hmm.
either running or throwing. But he'd run into too many sacks or like he wouldn't find the right guy because like defensive would know like, hey, we can't let this guy like loose. We have to spy him. And I don't think he did a really good job of like calling out blitzes
Hmm.
like earlier in the season. And it kind of like you kind of saw it again, like with all like the different exotic blitzes. It didn't help that Brian Flores would change post snap what he was showing pre snap as far as like who are the blitzers or like
Hmm.
what is the plays, and then changing the plays like after the snap. Like that definitely didn't help at all. And they didn't rely on DJ Moore like early in the game like they did the previous 2 weeks. I was really surprised by that because they had a formula and they just didn't rely on it. So it's tough to blame the running back room was kind of decimated. They did what
Mhm.
they could with that, but it was kind of like a disappointing showing after what you saw offensively. And
Mhm.
Patriots kind of put in a tough spot when he came in, but like he didn't even give DJ Moore a chance on the interception. He like floated a duck like 15 yards away from him,
Mhm.
and I'm just like, you might as well take the check down at that point. Like if you're just trying to
Mhm.
make a play happen. And he admitted he's like, oh, it's a horrible throw and stuff. But like, I don't want to be too hard on the kid. It's his first start
Mhm.
ever. He was
Mhm.
undrafted, so like you got to keep your expectations low. But he did flash in the preseason, so
Mhm.
who knows? Maybe the Bears offense shows up. On a positive note, their defense looked really, really good. It looked the
Mhm.
best it ever had in the season. Like,
Mhm.
granted, the Vikings didn't have Justin Jefferson, but like Addison and KJ Osborne were like really good players. Like Hawkins is a really good player. Like they still have
Mhm.
guys that Kirk can throw to.
Mhm.
And I thought the Bears offense was Bears defense rather was physical to line and stop them. But
Mhm.
credit to the Vikings, they pounced, they capitalized on mistakes, and
Mhm.
they still have a formula to win. I'm not as high on them without Justin Jefferson, but they still have an outside chance of like making some noise.
Mhm. Okay, and I don't have too much to add on to it. Yeah, I mean, Bears, they lost. Um, it's okay. The
Yep,
Broncos lose all
they
the time
did.
too. But yeah, I thought Badger he looked decent for first time really playing in an NFL game. Especially just kind of looking back at his draft capital as well. Um, yeah, I don't know. Vikings. You'd hope that they'd be able to produce. Even obviously, Justin Jefferson's like an unbelievable talent. I feel like you would have hoped that the Vikings would have still been a little bit more competent with just the remaining players that they had. I mean, you have Hawkinson, who's arguably like a top five tight end in the league right now. You have Jordan Addison, who you drafted in like the first round. You have KJ Osborne, who I mean, I wouldn't go to say he's elite, but like he's again a decent starting wide receiver. And then you have your running back room, which is around average, and so it's like you have a handful of decent pieces, but like you still struggle to put up points, which I found to be a little bit worrisome. But yeah, kind of all I got here. And
Yeah,
so
I'll just add a quick note on the receivers. I know we're running kind of late with the games, but um, Addison and KJ Osborne had the same percentage of targets in week 6, so it's like more Kirk is evenly distributing this. But I think how he's distributing this is a little bit more like telling. Um,
mhm,
KJ Osborne's getting 20% at the third and fourth down targets. So like other than Hawkinson, he's going to be the guy you'll expect to see like getting targeted on third and fourth down. Those are crucial like downs, those are must pass downs. So like I think he'll stay the more consistent producer. He's had like
mhm,
more catchable targets, like obviously 100% of his targets were catchable. Um, Jordan Addison was like 80%,
mhm,
because his average depth of target was 14, whereas Osborne's was 8, and
mhm,
his air yards were higher, his end zone targets were higher, his play action targets were 40% higher. So the way I see Jordan Addison being used is like the play action game. Like if they need an explosive play, they're going to Addison. But he might be more like boom bust than Osborne based on what
mhm,
you see in week 6.
yeah. Um, moving on to the next game, though, we talked about it briefly just a little bit ago, but it is the Eagles and Jets. I kind of added most of what I wanted to say about just both teams, but are there any other like any other bits that you wanted to add for the Eagles and Jets?
We can skip this one. I think the one
Okay.
thing to note is that Brees is back.
Mhm.
Not too worried about him like
Mhm.
anymore with the injury. I was kind of worried that he might like have compensatory injuries, like coming back from an ACL tear, like
Mhm.
there's like hamstring pulls or like twisted ankles, things that come up
Mhm.
where like you don't have your complete balance back yet. But like
Mhm.
he looks incredible, man. It's like
Yeah.
amazing. He's already this good, like coming off an ACL.
Mhm. Yeah. Um. Then the next game we got is the Giants and the Bills. Um. I guess what were some key takeaways you got from this game right here?
Giants defense looked really, really good. Like I
Mhm.
was really surprised by that. Um,
Hmm.
uh, like other than a boneheaded mistake by Tyrod Taylor, like
Oh
in
yeah.
not in like in calling a run play when like a clock is ticking down and you have no timeouts, that's just a bad decision. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, I get it. Saquon's your best player, but that's not the only way you can use them in that
Hmm.
situation. Like, you could have used like a play action fake to still sell the run to Saquon and
Hmm.
like make him a decoy and make him leak out into the flat or something like that, to use his explosiveness that way.
Hmm.
And you still have Darren Waller. Like, he's a huge end zone target. Like, at that point, you want to take shots, like,
Hmm.
regardless. So I think that was telling. I think another telling stat is looking at the Bills offense. Like 22% of their drives were a touchdown. Like they had 22% of the drives a touchdown against the Giants, but they were all through the air, and there's no like running game to speak of. So it's like kind of like, who do they trust when they get into the red zone? Like other than Josh Allen, like
Hmm.
is Josh Allen their only rushing offense? And that was kind of crazy.
Hmm.
And the one thing to point out with the Giants too is like they didn't have any scores with a touchdown, yet they almost like they were in a position to win the game if not for that
Hmm.
blatant pass interference call, which just goes to show like it was more about like the Bills not executing on offense, taking too many chances on fourth down,
Hmm.
and also a combination of like Brian Dable knowing what Josh Allen does best and like telling Wink Martindale like basically what defense to call basically because it made
Hmm.
a difference.
Yeah. 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 It was unfortunate that this game ended basically on a non-call. Like, because again, it's like I think we've talked about this the past couple weeks
They
as
gotta
well, but
fix this, man. It's
it
ridiculous.
is pretty annoying when like like a whole game goes and basically the winner is decided by whether a penalty is called or not called. And like again, if we just had more consistency during these situations where it's like, like theoretically, if I'm 100% certain if this was the Chiefs offense and that happened to Travis Kelsey instead of Darren Waller, a flag would have 100% flown there. Um,
Especially Taylor Swift was there.
especially if Taylor Swift was there. They would have actually, right before the flag was thrown, they would have panned to her and then they would have gone to the ref. But
No,
um,
but this wasn't the only game though. Like even San Francisco got the short end of the stick at the end of
mhm,
that game. If you look at how Cleveland played a great game, like their
mhm,
defense like deserved the win, but some of the calls at the end of the drive, it's just kind of like what's the consistency in the call? What
mhm,
are you calling? What are you not calling? Like you got to make
mhm,
that consistent, like based on how you called it the first and second quarters. And I just don't think
yeah,
there's no like system or like I don't want to say punishment, but like like how is this regulated for refs? Like,
mhm,
what if they miss a call? Like, oh, too bad, the game's over. So
mhm,
I think there needs to be more exploratory like aspects on like, how to address bad calls.
mhm, yeah, yeah. Because I mean, like, I don't know. Because like the issue is like, I mean, like the contact initially starts within the 5 yard, like, you know, free for all zone basically. But then
Yeah,
like
that's
once,
fine.
which is fine. But then it's like towards the end where it's like, well, like sure, technically it's still like I guess part of the effects of that like initial contact, but it ends up interfering with his ability to catch the ball. Like he literally is
The
losing
definition of
it.
the rule, yeah.
It's definitely he literally doesn't have a hand to catch the ball with. Uh, in an end
And
zone
particularly
play.
in the red zone, it becomes like 1 yard. Like within
Hmm.
1 yard, you can't do like any picks or anything like that.
Hmm.
So that's even more like like troubling, like that you don't see
Hmm.
that. So
Yeah. Because then we're going to see something like this happen again in the playoffs, and then it's going to be annoying because then it's going
it's
to
gonna
feel
be
like
the
the refs
Saints and
just.
Rams all over again, dude.
Hmm. Yeah, but um, I mean Tyrod played decent for all that's considered. Having him to go against the Bills, after just playing his backup for a while, is a tall task to ask. And while they didn't really score, I mean he did a decent job moving the ball down. I mean he didn't outside of the halftime debacle, he really didn't do that many things to like hurt his chances with the or hurt his
He had
chances
some
winning
nice
the game.
throws to Sladen too.
Hmm.
Like they were nice, like deep passes where I'm like,
Hmm.
I don't know if Daniel Jones could do that. Like
Yeah,
it seemed like the offense was moving nicely with him.
yeah. Well, there's a reason why Tyrod's gotten a handful of opportunities to gap starting stints, and he's had a handful of opportunities to play actual football. Well, like, 'cause I think remember back on his first gig starting with the Bills, like, didn't he lead them to like a winning record in like like a wild card run or something like
Yeah,
that?
I think and then they were in the playoffs. Like that was the first year under McDermott. Like they
Yeah, that
looked
was his
really, really
first year
good.
starting, and you're like, Tyrod's kind of nice for like he's an easily forgotten backup, but he's a decent backup to have.
Yeah.
Um, but kind of all I got there. Um, yeah, and obviously short on time now, so we'll quickly go over this last game, which is the Cowboys and the Chargers. And I guess what were some of the things that you got from that?
Popped Dak Prescott, like after the first two drives, like it was tough. Like Khalil Mack looked like he was gonna go on a tear again. Like Joey
Hmm.
Bosa's coming back, like that's scary. And then Tui Pelotu on the Chargers, I think I got that rookie's last name right
Hmm.
somehow. Um, he looks pretty productive. He has like hits or misses sometimes.
Hmm.
Um, credit on them for targeting CD Lamb. Like CD Lamb's their best
Hmm.
weapon on the team. Like great job featuring him early and in key situations. They finally utilized like Brandon Cooks in like short situations like well. And dang, that Cowboys pass rush is as dangerous. So when we look at like Cleveland, like the Jets,
Hmm.
the Niners, and the Cowboys, like anytime you go against like those types of teams, like expect like your offensive production to like decrease by 10 points because like they're going to just put a lid on everything solely due to their pass rush. And I think you saw that.
Hmm.
Um, great plays in the secondary as well. Um, just a lot of good players. Like there's this one linebacker, number 14 on the Cowboys. I don't remember his name. Um, but they played him at the linebacker spot. He's undersized as a safety, but he has experience playing linebacker. He's like blowing up runs and screens and stuff like that. And
Hmm.
it's just like absolutely ridiculous. When he had that going on, like with the Micah Parsons, like that's just enough trouble on its own. So
Hmm.
total credit to the Cowboys. They pulled it out at the end. Um, yeah. Like it's tough. Like Eckler's first game back. Like Chargers always like do enough to put themselves in good situations, and then at the end they just like something happens where they just can't close the deal. Like it's just like they're just that team. Like I don't know how to cure it, dude.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, I don't know. These are both confusing teams to me. Feel like,
Someone had to lose this one.
yeah, and like they're both like teams that like on paper you'd be like, oh, these are like Super Bowl contending teams, but like I feel like both in our hearts know that these two teams are not Super Bowl contenders.
I
Uh,
mean I don't know about my heart because I have the Chargers winning the division this year. And
I mean,
my
like,
prediction's not looking good.
yeah, I mean, like looking as at least as of right now, like that's why like in the beginning of the season, you look at the team like the Chargers, you're like, oh, this is a team that could win the Super Bowl. But then midway through the season, you're like, huh? Like, I mean, they technically could, but like, they sure don't look like it. And same with the
Yeah.
Cowboys. Is like on paper, it's like, well, you got, at least an above average quarterback. You have a decent starting running back. You have a premier wide receiver with decent receiver depth. You have elite playmakers on defense. This is a team that could win the Super Bowl. And then the Cowboys start to play, and you're like, I don't know if these guys are Super Bowl like they're playoff contenders, but I don't know if they're Super Bowl contenders. Um,
I would still keep them a tier below, like San
mhm.
Francisco, like
Mhm.
the Eagles. Like I'm a little maybe like a sub tier below the Lions,
Mhm.
like and the Rams,
Mhm.
but like they're like a good wild card team. Like they could
Mhm.
win a game and not more than that. I still don't
Yeah.
think they move the needle past that.
Mhm. Yeah. But I mean, that's all I got for today. Do you have any other last tidbits to add before we close out?
Uh no, that's all I got. Um who do you got for week six not week six, week seven's Thursday night football?
Oh, who's in between again?
Let me pull it up real quick because I don't know myself. I think
Oh,
it is the Saints and the Jaguars.
Saints and
Saints
the
and Jaguars.
Jaguars. Okay. Um, have to say, likely the Jaguars pull out this one. I think I don't know, just the past couple of weeks, I feel like we've seen a little bit more consistency from the Jaguars. And for what we'd like to see, and then I mean, like Saints, if they get back to like the way they were playing week 1 or 2, I think they could pull this out. But week 1 and 2 was a couple weeks ago, so that's why I give it. That's why I got to give it to the Jags.
Saints defense will keep them in it, but
Hmm.
pending if Lawrence is playing and he's healthy,
Hmm.
I think the Jags will win this. I think
Yeah.
they're like now that we look at it 3 or 4 weeks ago, their loss to the Texans looks like an outlier where the whole team just combusted that
Hmm.
afternoon. I think ever since then, their defense has looked a lot better. Their offense has found more consistency when teams have tried to scheme out Ridley, and
Hmm.
they look really good right now.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, so all we got for today. Remember to follow us on our Instagram at amon.a.mission. Um, we try to do coolish stuff on there sometimes. Um, less more than often, but we try. But um, hey, give us give us all your thoughts and comments about what you liked, what you disliked, what takes you thought were good, what takes you thought were bad, um, things you maybe want us to talk about. I don't know. But anyways, that's all for today. So peace out.
Peace, guys.